Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, I mean, I agree with Matt Vickers on the issue of not giving benefits to foreigners, but he did keep dodging the question, didn't he?
Yeah.
On how do you sort of withdraw those benefits? And I must admit, I haven't given a lot of thought to that, but I think the principle is absolutely the right one, and it would be an incredibly straightforward way of saving literally billions. I mean, Keir Starmer's desperately rummaging around down the back of the sofa, it seems, to try to make up the shortfall caused by his own party refusing to contemplate any cuts on benefits. That's a way that would be very, very popular.
Well, it would, but the trouble is, again, it's the mechanisation of all of these things. You know, if you've already let it go so badly wrong and gone so far that if you've got a house full of people, all of whom are probably on one benefit or another, you know, these guys know how to milk the system, don't they? Because they've been encouraged to do it for years and years and years, and suddenly you try and bring in a way of stopping it from happening, and you'll find it impossible to do. Just deport them. You just have to deport them in the end or something, don't you?
Quite possibly. I mean, you know, the truth is that there are a lot of people claiming benefits illegitimately. So, you know, it's not just a question of saying you're foreign, you're a foreign national, you haven't earned this. I mean, we could start by actually reducing the number of people who are claiming benefits fraudulently.
Yeah.
We know that it's absolutely prolific, not just amongst foreign nationals, of course. I read over the weekend that's only, I think, 20%, perhaps less, of assessments for PIP are done face to face. You know, I know from talking to those PIP assessors that they would much rather be doing all the assessments face to face. The only way you can really tell straight away whether someone is or isn't, whether they do or don't have a legitimate claim to that benefit.
Yeah, well, exactly right. But when people are claiming things because they've got tennis elbow, or they've got acne, or they're a bit frightened of going out because they think they can be sort of diagnosed with agoraphobia, you know, the list is endless. It just doesn't stop. And you get to the point where you think, am I the only person in Britain that's not on benefits? You know, am I the only person? I don't know anyone that's on benefits really, but clearly there are a lot more people on them than we even realise.
Well, it's just got completely out of control, hasn't it? And, you know, those figures of some 3,000 people a day adding to the list of people claiming disability benefits, this is a completely insane. I mean, if there were really that many people who are incapable of doing anything, all our centres of all our towns would be just full of people in wheelchairs hobbling along on crutches and so on. I mean, it's just a complete nonsense. We all know it's a complete nonsense. Yes, there are many people who really do need the help, and they're the people who lose out if an awful lot of other people are taking the mickey, because it just leads to less resources directed at those who really need it.
And once again, it's this hangover from COVID where nobody sees anybody and everybody does everything online, and everybody knows that you can buck the system if you don't ever have to actually turn up anywhere.
Yeah, and I think there are whole other areas relating to children, and perhaps we'll come on to that because I heard you talking earlier on about special needs.
Yeah.
But there are whole benefits linked to your child being diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there is a minority, a very small number of children who really do have something, you know, an actual condition. But in many cases, I'm afraid, I think that ADHD is down to bad parenting. You know, children not having enough exercise, not being disciplined, not having enough chance to run off steam. And that may be the circumstances in which households are living. You know, it's much easier if you're lucky enough to have a big garden or live in a nice village and go up to the park. But I do think that we've pathologized an awful lot of children who are just a bit bouncy.
Yeah. No, it's also the medication brigade, isn't it? Once again, saying, oh yeah, that's fine, we can medicate you for that. If you're feeling a bit weird sometimes, you feel a bit anxious, you know, well, how about you just actually, you know, make people less anxious by allowing them to find out that there are ways of challenging themselves, or ways of curing themselves of that. You know, sometimes people are just a bit nervous about going out into the big wide world. Well, we probably all were at one point or other. You know, who hasn't been, you know, terrified of a job interview or an exam or something like that? It doesn't mean you need to go to a doctor and get a load of prescription pills for it. I mean, it was so bad a couple of years ago, they actually ran out of ADHD medication for children in this country, and huge numbers of parents couldn't get the stuff that they wanted their kids to have.
And a bit of me is thinking, good, you know, maybe they discovered that actually the children don't need it. I mean, I don't know, I cannot imagine putting a child on medication for not being able to pay attention. There's got to be other ways of doing it. Now, I'm not a doctor, and before a bunch of people write in complaining that I'm saying ADHD doesn't exist, I'm sure it does exist. What I'm saying is, yes, there may be a small number of children that genuinely have some kind of condition like this. But I don't think that we do children any favours at all, or indeed their parents, by just throwing pills at them for what may well be something that could be sorted out by different forms of management, you know. And those families need, I'm not saying they don't need any help, you know, this is genuine. And parents, I know how hard it is to be a parent of bouncy children. They may need other types of support, but I'm just not buying the whole, all our kids, all these thousands and thousands of children need to be put on drugs to control their behaviour. It's like, come on, it's a nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think so. Let me finish up with some net zero breaking news, latest from the world of Ed Miliband. We got a school that went on fire because the solar panels spontaneously combusted up in the northeast of England, which raises all sorts of questions about the toxic nature of the smoke that comes off these things, and also of how likely that is to continue to happen because of hot weather. Now we've also been told that Legionnaire's disease can be a big problem if you've got a heat pump, because the water isn't heated to a sufficient temperature to completely wipe out any of the bacteria in there. So, you know, not a good start to the week for net zero lovers.
Oh dear. I mean, solar panels, there's a lot of them round where I live in the Cotswolds. And, you know, sometimes I look at them, and when the sun's shining on them, which is not very often, unless you happen to be having a good summer like we are, they can look almost like water. So they're not most offensive of things, you know, versus, for example, loads of wind turbines or hideous
pylons or something.
But the idea that we should be carpeting vast swathes of our countryside in these things just seems to me completely topsy-turvy. And now we hear that at one point they were producing too much energy, which can't be stored properly, and the companies were having to be incentivized to switch them off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just completely bonkers, isn't it?
It really is. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it's the one area which Starmer absolutely steadfastly refuses to pull back the expenditure on. You know, almost everywhere else he's going, he's trying to make cuts here, there and everywhere. But net zero, no. He's absolutely spending as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, and I think another thing that isn't calculated in all those costs is all the public buildings that now have to comply with so many net zero regulations that they are costing many, many millions more than they need to cost. This is out of public money, whether it's a school or a hospital or whatever. The net zero cost of our public construction projects is absolutely astronomical. And I don't know whether anyone has done any research on this, whether it's been collated in any way, but I think that people would be shocked at how much more expensive basic infrastructure is, or these sort of, as I say, whether it's a GP surgery or a new nursery school or whatever, they all now have to comply with a bunch of absolutely daft stuff, which adds millions to the cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, absolutely right. Isabel, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott Talks international editor.